Hello and welcome to this episode of the Fortnightly Dispatch, brought to you by the Baker Street Irregulars. I'm Steve Doyle, and I'm your host. This is the first episode of season 4, and I've had so many people contact me and ask, when is the Fortnightly Dispatch going to come back, Steve? And now. The answer is now. We had a good long layoff. It was a very busy holiday season. Coming out of the pandemic was kind of a challenge on a lot of fronts, but we're all back in the real world more or less nowadays, and it's time for the show to start up. And we have a great one today. Um, you know, um, we all know about some of the great private collections of Sherlockiana, but we also need to think about the great public collections of Sherlockiana. There are library collections around the world that really have outstanding collections. Portsmouth and in England and is one. But here in North America, the big three are the University of Minnesota Sherlock Holmes collections and the Lilly Library of Rare Books and Manuscripts at Indiana University, and the Toronto Metropolitan Sherlock Holmes collection just over the border in Canada. Of course, there are other ones. There's the Newberry in Chicago, and there's down in Texas. They're having a big conference coming up featuring the collections down there in the University of Texas holdings. But today we are welcoming the three most prominent libraries. I want to just have a conversation about the libraries themselves and using the libraries, their histories and their collections, and get to know the people that you would interact with if you avail yourself of the opportunity to do research there or just go and look at cool things. So without any further ado, welcome to the show, everybody. I'm very happy to have you all here today. This is a treat. I've been trying to pull off this topic for a long time, and so it's great to have you all here. It's hard to get 4 people on the same calendar day. I think that's a bit of a logistical miracle you're all seeing right here. So it's a good day. So I would like to let's go around and introduce everybody. I'll start with Erica. Erica Dow, introduce yourself and where you're coming to us from today.
Sure. So my name's Erica Dowell. I'm Associate Director and Curator of Modern Books and Manuscripts at the Lilly Library at Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana.
Great. Tim, how about you?
And I'm Tim Johnson. I am the E.W. McDermott Curator of the Sherlock Holmes collections and also Curator of Special Collections and Rare Books for the University of Minnesota Library's Twin Cities campus, and I hang out in Anderson Library on the West Bank side of the Mississippi here.
And Jesse.
Yes, my name is Jessie Amalo. My role here is Services Specialist. I work with the Arthur Conan Doyle Collection in the Special Collections Department at the Toronto Reference Library in downtown Toronto.
It is great to have you all here. I have been to all 3 libraries, so I'm proud of that. That's a good thing. I want to talk about, let's start with sort of a general topic. I want to get into the specifics of each library in a few minutes, but and a little bit about the history of each collection. But I would like to start with these public collections in general. There are people who think it's peculiar that large academic institutions or public libraries are devoting these kinds of resources to something like Sherlock Holmes. So I'd like to talk about that a bit. What is the value, do you guys think, of these institutions regarding these collections?
Well, I could talk a little bit about our collection here and the history just in why we haven't. So a little while ago, the library was looking to, they had a lot of circulating collections. They wanted to focus in on reference and more specifically focus in on kind of specialized collections in order to attract researchers kind of as a hub. So they did over time kind of develop some different special collections. The way that Conan Doyle came to us was actually through a local rare book dealer. He had come across a large, someone's private collection that had been offered to him, and it had been taking up quite a large amount of space in his store. So he was looking to kind of give the library a deal, and we determined that there were a lot of early detective fiction novels, a lot of Arthur Conan Doyle, and I think the argument had been made that he was kind of, you know, the father of the detective fiction genre, and he created a character that's universally known. So that appeal really is worldwide. So that's kind of where we started.
It seems like it's not unusual that these collections start, the public collections start as a private collection somewhere. That's the case with Minnesota, isn't it, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, the origin of our collection is a purchase of the James Iraldi collection. Iraldi was a Baker Street regular. The origins, though, I think are still shrouded in a little bit of a mystery, because I don't know who made the suggestion to buy the Iraldi collection. I have a couple hunches, but I haven't found any documentary evidence. So it's, you know, did E.W. McDermott, as a retired university librarian volunteering in special collections, whisper in Austin McLean's ear and say, you know, we should have a nice collection of first editions? You know, also what's interesting to me is that the acquisition of those rare books fit into a larger mission of the University of Minnesota Libraries as, first of all, a grant institution. So there was, you know, a gap in the collection that needed filling, and it just so happened that it was Holmes, in this case, that filled the gap. But I could point to other instances where there have been gaps that have been filled to support some aspect of the university's mission. But and that's probably also true for Erica's institution.
Sure. Of course, Indiana University isn't a land grant institution, but we do have a very, we are a public university that has a responsibility to serve the state, and the Lilly Library, of course, is used to serving as a resource to anyone, whether they're a researcher or just a curious individual who is interested in our collections. And I think that we all serve as part of a worldwide, certainly loosely organized, but part of a worldwide network of cultural heritage institutions that seek to, gather and preserve the fruits of our culture, and the cultures that have preceded us. And so what I think is interesting about that is that, right, it includes, libraries like ours can include great tomes like, Copernicus, or important works of history or science, but it can also include all the other things that make life rich and interesting, such as Sherlockian collections. And I think those got started at the Lilly Library really from the beginning, because the very first director of the Lilly Library, back when it opened in 1960, was David Randall, who was a member of the BSI and for many years was a rare book dealer with Scribner's, and helped to as I understand it, he handled and sold many of the extant manuscripts of the Sherlock Holmes stories, as well as bought and sold many of the most important books and first editions and things like that, and helped to sell some of those to our founding donor, Josiah K. Lilly Jr., as well as, I think, gather some of them up later when he was officially a librarian instead of a book dealer.
And I love that those kind of intertwining things too, because I'm sure there are things in our collection that we might have purchased from Scribner's when David Randall was running that outfit. I know for a fact that two of the leaves that we have from a Gutenberg 42-line Bible were acquired from Scribner's in 53. Now, I don't remember what Randall's dates were at Scribner's, but he may have well been the one to handle that transaction.
That's quite possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. That is really interesting. Well, let's talk about what the collections of the various libraries are. I know that as far as Sherlockian holdings go, we'll start with Minnesota because it's obviously the largest, I think, of the public institutions, probably in the world. So, Tim, tell us about the Minnesota Sherlock Holmes collection.
And I think you're right that we are the largest, although I'm always a little bit cautious about that because one of the other great collections is the Richard Lansing Green bequest at the city of Portsmouth, which I've had a chance to work in a couple times and gotten to know some of the staff there. The difference, I think, is Richard had a focus more on Conan Doyle, whereas what we're all about is documenting Sherlock Holmes in popular culture, from the rise of his appearance in the Beaton's Christmas Annual to present day fan fiction and whatever else is out there that's being created. So we've already mentioned the Irregulars collection, which in some ways was also an outgrowth of the formation of the Norwegian Explorers as a science society for the Baker Street Irregulars, with their first meeting here in 1948. And the 5 founders of that group were university faculty. And McDermott being the university librarian, in some ways you can draw a straight line from the formation of the Explorers to the acquisition of the Irregulars collection. So that plants the seed. And it's also the influence of the Explorers, I think, that drives the gift from Mary Kaler Hench on behalf of her and her late husband, Philip, when the Hench collection comes to the university in 1978, 4 years after the Irregulars collection had been acquired. And it's at that point, I think, that the Sherlockian world kind of sits up and starts to wonder what's going on in Minneapolis. Because here you have this truly amazing collection that includes 4 Beaton's Christmas Annuals, original manuscript leaves from the Hound, a lot of Frederick Dorr Steele artwork, sketches, in addition to all of the books and other things that the Henches collected, including some really interesting prints that they acquired when they were in Switzerland doing their research around the Reichenbach. They were acquiring prints of the Reichenbach area, and those in themselves are just very interesting in terms of kind of late 19th or mainly 19th century prints. But when the Hench collection comes, in some ways, that becomes a critical mass that starts to attract people's attention. It has its own gravitational pull. Why wouldn't you want to see 4 Beaton's Christmas Annuals?
Right.
Or the?
I mean, that happens with these library collections.
And
they start to pull in other material.
And for me, part of the extension of that story then is that one of the people that collection pulled in was John Bennett Shaw, who was very interested to see the Hench collection. And once he saw it and realized how it was being cared for and made accessible, the university, to their credit, started talking with John and wondering what was going to happen with his collection. And again, it's some of these early Norwegian explorers, McDermott, Bryce Crawford, Theodore Blagan, who are kind of driving that conversation and saying, you've got a fellow here with a world-class collection, probably the largest private collection in the world. He's interested in our stuff, but why don't we have a conversation with him? And the result of that conversation is that John, even though he has no connection whatsoever to the university, he's a Notre Dame graduate, decides, this is a place where I'd like to see my stuff end up. And that agreement is signed in the early 80s.
That is really interesting. Well, the Erica, let's talk about the Lily. I know that the Lily right now is being probably in public's mind largely as the in Sherlockian terms as the home for the Baker Street Irregulars archives. But it had a Sherlockian collection before that. Isn't that right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, but certainly focused principally on, I would say, traditional, bibliographic kind of collecting. First editions. We certainly have a Beaton's first editions of, I think, of all the American and British, original collections of the stories and novels. One manuscript, Adventures of the Red Circle. We have other collections that relate to mystery and detective fiction, 19th and 20th century. We have wonderful collections of Golden Age detective novels that came to us through a purchase by David Randall. There's a very interesting story in Dukedom Large Enough where he describes how he sold the collection to a woman who was giving it to her husband, I think a retiring police detective. She just bought all these amazing, beautiful books, and he was afraid that somebody was just going to be reading them and leave them on the nightstand, probably. And instead, he got offered the collection later when he was at the Lilly Library, and looked like nobody touched the books in the meantime. So he was very happy to bring them back into a library where they could be taken care of. The Mystery Writers of America archive is also at the Lilly Library, and we're just finishing up cataloging on the papers of Barbara Mertz, who is a writer who wrote under a couple of pseudonyms, probably most famously as Elizabeth Peters, wrote a long series of mystery novels where the protagonist was Amelia Peabody, an Egyptologist.
Oh, yes. Yes. Those are quite popular.
They are quite popular. Absolutely.
We can't forget Ian Fleming as well.
Oh, right. And Ian Fleming, where we have his manuscripts, not so much of an archive of his papers, really, but manuscripts for the books, which are quite interesting to look at, as well as his book collection, which was focused on books that kind of changed the world, everything from the initial Boy Scout manuals to, say, Mal's Little Red Book and everything in between.
That's so great. Jesse, tell us a little bit about the Toronto collection, and maybe how it's called the Arthur Conan Doyle collection. It's not called the Sherlock Holmes collection or anything like that. What is the focus of the collection?
The focus is Arthur Conan Doyle's life and works. So obviously Sherlock Holmes is a huge part of that, but we do also focus on everything else, his travels, his spiritualism, all of it. So anything and everything collected to Sherlock. Or sorry, to Arthur Conan Doyle. Yes, not Sherlock, but yes. So we have over 25,000 items in the collection. It is also a unique special collection in that a large portion of it is browsable to the public. It still has to be viewed in a special center. However, the public can just come in and kind of browse the books, which is a very unique thing for us to have. In terms of what we have, so obviously Sherlock Holmes, Arthur Conan Doyle, we have manuscripts written by Doyle. So we have some plays, short stories, articles. We have a large collection of letters from Conan Doyle to Greenhouse Smith, his editor. So that's a very strong area for our collection. We have various editions and translations. We do have a Beaton's Christmas Annual. parodies and pastiches, biographies, criticisms, bibliographies, periodicals related to the various Sherlock Holmes societies. We have stage and screen adaptations, we have photographs, and we have collectibles, so artwork, posters, things like that. Yeah, so quite a large collection. We're also constantly trying to digitize as much as we can. We're kind of focusing on letters these days. So we've had a lot of feedback from researchers that they're happy to see those and have access from remote locations.
You know, you mentioned that everything's browsable. I mean, that really struck me when I visited visited Toronto, that it's the designated space it's all right there on the shelves. I mean, you can just like go up and
Yes.
take them down, you know, it's like there they are.
Well, I will say, so only a portion of it is browsable. We do have a closed stacks area where we do keep our rarest materials. However, the browsable area does represent the whole collection. It has items from the entire Dewey Decimal System, so you would kind of get a sense of everything in the collection from the room. Yeah.
Some of you kids out there may not remember what the Dewey Decimal System is. It's a thing.
Public library here.
You know, it's being familiar with all three libraries, that accessibility, I think, is a remarkable thing. I know that it kind of, there are people who collect Sherlock Holmes, obviously, and I've heard many people say, well, when my time comes, and this is great, I'm going to sell everything. I know Peter Blau, that's his philosophy. He's got that huge collection, which I think is great because, people love to collect things.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to be able to have an opportunity to have things. But the other people are saying, well, none of it should be libraries. It should, it just goes into a vault where people never see it again. And but that has not been my personal experience with any one of your libraries. I know that when I was an undergrad at Indiana University, somebody had mentioned to me, oh, you like Sherlock Holmes, you should go to the Lilly Library. They have Sherlock Holmes stuff. And I was like, like, whatever. And so I went over there and I was like, oh my gosh. And they're just bringing it out, they're like, here's the Beatons. I'm like, oh, I can touch it. They're like, yeah, just be careful, And that's the same way today. I mean, if you go to the Lilly,
yeah,
everything, it's wonderful. And I know Minnesota many times, over the years, it's probably a constant thing. People are constantly contacting Minnesota. Do you have anything about this person or this book or this event? And you can, I know a lot of your stuff is online, you can look. And that accessibility, I think, really is tremendously important. And like I said, Toronto, it's like I walked in and it's like, wow, it's all here. So I'll just spend the afternoon looking around, see what you got. So I think that's marvelous that accessibility is a feature of all three of the libraries here today.
Well, and another thing to throw into the mix too is people often forget about interlibrary loan. Now, granted, we're not going to send the Beatons out on interlibrary loan, but but it's one of the fun things is to be able to go into the collection and deliver a volume or whatever, an article to our interlibrary loan unit, Minitex, which is actually a separately funded agency that started in the university libraries, but has taken on a life of its own to the point where they handle more interlibrary loans than any other place in the country. So it's kind of in the DNA of librarians to want to share, to make it accessible, whether it's through an online platform or through a scan or a photocopy, however it can be put in the reader's hand. It's the reader that in the end is the important person here. We want to get the stuff to them. We don't want to hide it away.
Hey, this is a good spot to take a pause for a moment and hear from our commercial sponsor. Okay, we're back. Well, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to add some other things that we do. One of our top priorities in special collections is digitizing. So we have hundreds of thousands of items that we have been able to digitize. That's across all of our collections. However, the Conan Doyle collection is part of that. It was so many items out of copyright now. So we're able to do those. And we do also try to put on as many exhibits that we can a year. Again, the various special collections, but we have an exhibit space on the first floor where we really showcase our items there too.
So is digitizing, which I think is fantastic, is that an effort at the Lilly and in Minnesota as well?
It is. Although it's also important to remember that digitizing is more than just sticking something on a scanner, and the big part actually is describing what you've just scanned and creating the metadata so that it's discoverable later on when you put it in your catalog or your online finding aid or your digital repository. But yeah, we actually have 3 different platforms depending on the kind of digital material. The biggest one, and the one where most of the home stuff resides, is called the U-Media Archive, which you can find from the library's main page, or you can search it from the Sherlock Holmes collections page.
What about the Lilly, Erica? What's the digitizing thing there? What's the status there?
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, the first thing that we do is we digitize stuff for individual researchers on demand all the time. And I'm sure that Minnesota and Toronto also do that kind of thing frequently. And then we do have more production digitizing. As Tim said, that's it's a lot more complicated than it sounds sometimes as far as what's involved. And we are kind of at an inflection point here at IU where we're in the middle of a big content migration, which involves sort of, IU is very involved, has a great, what used to be called a great digital library program, which has different names now, but that meant that they created a lot of custom designed service points, and websites to present our digitized content. And all those things are now kind of being migrated into kind of new front ends and sometimes new back end kind of things too. And so we're at this kind of cruddy point where we can't add a lot of digital content right now because everybody's too involved in moving all the existing content and getting the new interfaces set up. And instead of having, kind of like Minnesota, we have things in several different areas, and we will continue to have that, but it'll be fewer kind of service points for different types of content, rather than having this for books and this for photographs and this for media and this for sheet music and things like that. Our trend is certainly to try to push it into more like a couple places, and then you can access it from the archival site or from the book catalog or things like that. But we do have some of these things are definitely available, and digitalcollections.iu.edu definitely has some of the Baker Street Irregulars content live from the BSI archive, which is good, because it's not good for the BSI doesn't like it if their content is hard to find, and it's going to get better, but it's our digital stuff is just in flux right now, and it's going to be great when it's done.
It is going to be great. It will be great.
Well,
It
and that's,
will.
and that's a thing too, that technology sometimes dictates things to us. We had to migrate. I don't know how many migrations I've gone through of web platforms, and sometimes with those migrations, administrators change up the policy a bit in terms of what's going to be thought of as content. So, we in the last couple of years migrated to a new web platform But what that also meant is that some of the content we had on our Sherlock Holmes website disappeared, like the Universal Sherlock Holmes. So we're trying to figure out where can we
Yeah.
relocate that. And there are, in some cases, wheels within wheels within wheels that
Yeah.
I'm
that
still,
dictate.
this makes me
Right.
think about, acquisition and things coming in and donations. And that probably, is it a case that sometimes material coming into the collections is just not enough? You can't keep up with it? Is it technologically or man hours or that sort of thing? I mean, there's so much content generated in the Sherlockian world all the time. And I just, I'm just listening to this conversation and trying to imagine that endless river flowing into the library. And, you've got an intern and some hardworking librarians who have other work too, trying to keep up with that. And I just think, man, that's a job,
Never
Yeah.
a dull
And
moment.
it's not just, I mean, and none of us are, I mean, I think maybe Tim is closest to being, having some of his work just about Sherlock Holmes, but most of us yeah, I mean, the stream of things from the Sherlockian world is one thing, but, talk to me about the other, 15 donors that are in my inbox right now with questions about this or sending a little something else. Or I talked to the director from 20 years ago about donating my papers, and I'm ready now. And there's a lot, and you never have enough resources. Although, I have to try to remember to count myself lucky whenever I can, that I'm part of a big university library system, and I'm part of a special collections library that has, I don't know, 24 or so full-time employees and the ability to hire students to get things done. But it's also never enough. We're always trying to think of better, more efficient ways to try to get through backlogs and get things taken care of. And
big
Yeah.
job.
it's a challenge.
Yeah, big challenge.
We have an in-house cataloger, so that we're pretty fortunate about that. She's her sole duty is to catalog. But when you look at the various collections, some of them are stronger in newer material and mass-produced things, and obviously generate a lot more that way. Whereas the other collections are focusing on that one rare item they're trying to get. So it is a balancing act, really, enabled in being able to catalog, large um, deliveries of items versus the one rare item that comes in here and there. So
How
but
often do you all sort of actively seek to acquire items versus things that are donated?
I browse around every week or two, special sites to take a look. I also have people frequently reach out to me, which is great. That's another way that things come to me. So I'm always trying to be mindful of the budget where we are in the year and just kind of work through that. Also, like placing an order for newer materials. Might have to do that a few times a year and wait for those to come in. And then when I'm looking for older things, most of the time we have it. So it's very challenging to try to find something kind of within our budget range to add, because we're very fortunate we have so much of that material. So
Yeah, one of the things that's happened is that with the popularity of Holmes through the movies, TV, whatever, a lot of the original stuff, the market's gone through the roof. And it's pretty much beyond our means. I mean, I have a small endowment and I have some state money that comes to me to handle some acquisitions. But I mean, the last time I bid on anything at an auction, the pre-auction estimate was $3,000 to $5,000. We put a bid in for 14 and it sold for 85. So, I mean, and that was 3 pieces of paper. I mean,
Wow.
that was three pieces of paper. Doyle, it was, I think, related to a contest in the Strand. It might have been the last things that Doyle ever wrote related
Wow.
to Sherlock Holmes. And we thought, well, this would be fun to add to the collection as a way to document, but no.
You got a story out of it though. That's
Well, you know, the funny part of that too was I wanted to watch the auction live, and I happened to be up at a resort in northern Minnesota where the wireless was not that great in the cabin. And so I ended up sitting out on a picnic table because the screen porch was blocking the wireless signal, but I could pick it up at the picnic table. So I watched the auction from there. I think it was a very chilly fall day. And yeah, I mean, if you've ever watched an auction, when they get to your lot, it's going to happen in about a minute. And within about 5 seconds, they had blown by our bid, and the whole thing was done in a minute. And then when the hammer came down, $85,000. Boom.
Ooh.
So,
Well,
you know, the flip side of that is trying to find out who are the new writers, the undiscovered writers, the people who are creating things now whose archive has not yet become exorbitantly priced, and you know, start to have those conversations with those people, strike up a relationship. And you know, on the print side, we're lucky in that we have a relationship with Otto Penzler. Otto's been such a good friend to the Minnesota collection. You know, anything new that comes in that's Holmes related, it gets set aside, and every now and then a box comes with more material for the collection. So, you know, I can't say thanks enough to Otto for what he's done to help us build the collections here at Minnesota with recent publications and some rare and occasionally archival stuff too. Yeah, Otto's been a good friend.
Erica, I know that we haven't talked about too much about the BSI archives being there, but I know that's a steady stream of material that's being acquired at the Lilly. Is that right? I mean,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I mean, potential donors talk to Tom Horrocks, you know, the chair of the BSI Trust, to kind of clear things before they get sent here. But absolutely. And we get something coming in, certainly every month there's a little something, sometimes several somethings. And lots of times it's a small file. But yesterday or the day before, we got 3 big boxes of, I guess, dinner packets for the past 30 years or something. So that'll be on the list for later this week, I think, to try to see if we can. They're in big moving boxes right now. We'll see if we can get those in something that's a little more library sized for and put that on the list for processing. We just today started training our new BSI Trust intern. The Trust very kindly gave us some money to hire someone dedicated. It's 12 hours a week. It's a undergraduate student this time. Maybe next year we'll get a graduate student who's actually studying to be an archivist. But we do have a fan of Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson named Tammy, who's getting started just today on a whole variety of things, including making an online exhibition documenting the in-person exhibition we had in 2019 called Building an Archive, which was all about the history of the Baker Street Irregulars. So I think that'll be great, and she'll get trained and involved in adding materials to the archival collection too, under the guidance of our archivists. So I think that'll be a great thing, and also have a couple other projects kind of, on deck for that person too as we get going. It's exciting.
it is exciting. Another thing I love about all 3 of these libraries is the exhibitions or the special events or and all 3 libraries. Toronto just had one, correct, Jesse?
Yes. So we just celebrated the 50th anniversary of the collection. So we had a large exhibit just last year, a study in Sherlock and his creator, 50 Years of the Arthur Conan Doyle Collection. And then our friends group and the Bootmakers of Toronto also put on a 4-day conference called Jubilee at 221B in September. So it was a busy year for us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot of work. those
Yes.
things.
Yes.
And Tim, and Minnesota has every 3 years. I think the COVID kind of threw that schedule off a bit.
The pandemic threw it off a little bit. So the last triennial conference we had was in 2019. So in the 3-year rotation, it would have been 2022. What we did instead for last year, we did a 1-day conference, kind of a mini conference at the Minnesota History Center, because they're hosting one of 2 Sherlockian exhibits currently in town here. Sherlock Holmes, the exhibition, which is this big traveling show that's been on the road for 10 years. We're just starting planning now we're going to get the ball rolling again on the triennial conferences. So 2024, sometime in the summer, we're going to have a conference and an exhibit to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Sherlock Holmes collections here at Minnesota.
Great.
So
That's great.
I felt so bad to miss out on the Toronto celebration. But again, the pandemic threw a wrench into things because my wife and I had a 40th anniversary cruise planned for 2020, which got rescheduled to September of last year. So we were in Alaska instead of Toronto.
Oh, wow. Wow. Very nice.
And Erica, I know we just had, I say we because I just live up the road from the sort of from
Sort of. Yeah.
sort of the Glenn Moranker exhibition, which I think is in Minnesota now, right? I mean, that's the
Yep.
Sherlock Holmes and 221
Yes.
objects.
and that was quite spectacular. That was a big deal. And I have a habit of showing up at the Lily and going, "Hey, let's put on a." I'm doing something. You guys want to,
Right.
I always do that with like a conference through West Express or something. And that's what I love about the Lily. I know it's all the libraries. Someone comes knocking with a good idea like that, and it's always like, yeah, let's put on a show. Let's do it. And it's a wonderful thing because let's face it, we all love to. None of us wants that stuff to sit somewhere on a shelf and never seen. We all like to pull it out and look at it. That's always my sense when I come to any one of your libraries is that the joy in showing it off is the same as a private collector who likes to pull treasures off the shelf. It's like, look at this. We like to share that excitement of seeing those things. And
Well, exactly. I mean, I think the collections are fantastic, but it's the people who activate them, right? It's the people connecting over the interesting stuff that I think is what is so, that's really enriching.
right.
As much as it's exciting to fall into your research and to be, on your own, doing that, really, sharing it with others is really,
It really is.
that's a lot of fun and energizing.
And
The exhibitions also give us a chance to tell stories, and Sherlockians love to tell stories.
They do.
And part of the fun for exhibitions too is, the Moranker exhibit was at the Lily, and we were delighted to work with Glenn and Kathy, but also the staff of the Lily to make it happen here in Minneapolis. In the same way, when Toronto mounted an exhibition celebrating the anniversary of the Hound, I had the joy and also the challenge of hand carrying our manuscript leaves up to Toronto because we wanted to lend them for that exhibit. It just so happened.
Handcuff that to your wrist. I would have. I'm not going to.
Well, and it was complicated because I was traveling a month after 9/11. And so security had ramped up considerably. And then on top of it, the UK had mad cow going on. So when I got to Toronto, I had to walk through a special antiseptic mat and answer lots of questions about not being on a farm before I could get my way to the library and deliver the manuscripts for the exhibit. But I love those kind of cooperative things that we have a chance to do as librarians,
Yeah.
working with other institutions, other collectors. It's just that adds another level of fun to the whole thing.
Mhm.
We're really short on time. I told you it'd go fast. But I would just exhort the viewers out there to take advantage of the resources that these libraries have. These collections are dead unless somebody comes and looks at them and opens them up and finds things in there to write about or just to discover. I mean, I know there's tons of stuff in these collections that that there's stories yet to be told.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so all you viewers out there who are interested in learning more about Sherlock Holmes or Arthur Conan Doyle, I know our guests here today would love to help you get into their respective holdings. So I want to thank you all for coming. I have like 15 other, I have a list. I never get to more than half of it. So this is great. I want to thank you all for coming, and now back to work. I know you're all in your library, so we're shooting this during the day, so you can time out when they're busy library duties to visit us. So thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you, Steve.
Steve.
And that's it for this episode of the Fortnightly Dispatch. I want to thank you all for watching, and I urge you to come back in 2 weeks for another outstanding episode. We do have a really great guest lined up, which you will not want to miss. I also I mentioned this at the beginning of the show, but I want to say it one more time. I want to thank you all for writing or emailing and it coming up in person. It's happened many times. And letting me know how much you enjoy the show and how much you're looking forward to it coming back. And I've missed doing it as much as you've missed watching it. So here we are again. Until then, that's all we've got for now, but we will see you in 2 weeks for another episode. Thank you.
You should subscribe to the Baker Street Journal because it is the place to learn about what's going on in the world of Sherlock Holmes.
The Baker Street Journal is hands down my favorite Sherlockian thing to read. When it comes in the mail, my night is planned.
The Baker Street Journal is the place to play the game. If you're a Sherlockian, you want to be able to do the game of understanding the times of Sherlock Holmes, the stories of Sherlock Holmes, what Sherlock Holmes is all about.
If you are not a subscriber to the Baker Street Journal, you have no idea what you're missing. This is hands down the best writing about the writings you'll ever find.
You'll find great articles about new discoveries that are being made every single day. But beyond that, you'll find out what other people are doing and how you can become more involved in the world of Sherlock Holmes.